Hi, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Alumni Chats, where we interview alumni from the Department of Broadcasting and Journalism here at Western Illinois University. My name is Buzz Hoon, and I'll be serving as the host for the podcast. And today I have the honor of speaking with Jeff Politsch, who is a graduate of WIU from back in 1996, almost 25 years, right, Jeff? That we're going to be celebrating your graduation. Welcome to the podcast.
I'm glad to be here.
So, Jeff, you want to give us an update on where you are in your life journey, and then we'll kind of trace everything back from when you left Macomb.
Okay. Right now I'm living in the Carolinas. I live down near Charlotte, North Carolina. On the South Carolina side, I still work in television. I'm now up to the executive level, I guess you would say. I oversee a bunch of NASCAR shows. I work for NASCAR Productions, and I've worked for them for the last, this will be my 17th year. So time flies, but that's what I'm doing now. Still having fun and still working in the business.
So when you left Macomb back in 1996 and were getting started, did you ever imagine that this is the route that you would take?
No. I tell people all the time that this is pretty close to a dream job for me. I was a big racing fan growing up, big NASCAR fan. I knew I wanted to work in sports of some type. And to be able to work in NASCAR for me was a dream come true. I did, have those aspirations starting out to be on air and do those kinds of things, but that didn't work out. So I took the producer route, and I've produced oodles of television shows for ESPN and then for NASCAR. So it's been a great ride, a great journey, and I wouldn't really trade it for anything. It's been great.
So you grew up in Illinois, right, Jeff? You grew up in Mendota, and growing up, did you have any inclination that this is what you really were interested in? When did you know that you had an interest to be involved in television?
My parents tell a story that I used to be in our basement of our house growing up, and I had a record player that had a microphone, and I would take the mic and basically broadcast whatever I was watching, whatever sporting event was going on. A lot of times it was baseball. I'm a big baseball fan, baseball or racing or football, whatever. So I guess early on, I don't really remember that stuff, but I guess I did. I basically knew I wanted to do something in sports. I was a huge sports fan, played a lot of sports. So if I could do something in that realm, that was going to be perfect for me. And, lo and behold, it's worked out.
So when you come to WIU as a freshman, you were one of those early people that I got to know when I started at WIU, where you got involved right away, right?
That's correct. Yeah, that one of the reasons why I picked Western was, it was fairly small, and with the broadcasting department, if you had the aspiration to get involved early, you could. I went to a lot of the bigger schools, and they were like, "Nah, you can't get your hands on anything until you're like a junior." And I was like, well, I want to do this stuff, and find out if I like it. So when I was a freshman, I remember approaching you guys and asking if I can just tag along and go to the football broadcasts and go to the high school broadcasts and everything that we were doing back then. And that was great. And that, I wasn't getting any credit. I wasn't getting anything out of it, except for the experience, which to me, that was invaluable and perfect. And that's what I wanted to do. And I remember doing that for the first 2 years for sure, before I started getting credits in those classes, in those upper level classes. But yeah, that kind of thing. And then once I got to that upperclassman stage, I pretty much knew how to do everything. So it was then me becoming kind of the leader of the broadcast group and directing or producing or whatever it was, coordinating everything, instead of specifically doing the individual roles, because I had done all this. So yeah, that was a huge plus in my mind for Western and why I chose to go there. And it proved itself, and it really helped me, as I furthered my career in my learning.
And of course, those were the days we were known as WWIR, right?
That's correct. Yep. Yep. Did the newscasts. I did a couple semesters of that. I remember. I actually still have those WWIR newscasts blooper reels or outtake reels. Were put together, and I call them up every once in a while. I have them on DVD now, and my kids get a huge kick out of those. Seeing me, first of all, back in college, and then some of the mistakes I made and some of the mistakes other people made. So it's that's some entertainment for us.
But there was something about that live element, even back in college, where, you learn so much from that, even when you make mistakes. The attempt to try to be as professional as possible. There was a great learning that was going on behind the scenes.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's one of the biggest things. And, I took all that from Western and applied it to ESPN when I went and worked there early in my career, and then into NASCAR, because when you're in the heat of the moment, when you're producing a show, when you're directing your camera, on air, whatever you are, you have to make those split second decisions, and you have to be ready. Like it's got to be instinct. You don't have any time to think about it. You just got to do it. So the way to tackle those things is experience. And when you have experience being put in those situations, then you can, think about, okay, if that happens again, how do I handle this? So those, again, like you said, those types of situations are great, because it just teaches you. You're then more prepared the next time it happens, and you can think on your feet and make quick, decisive, actions and decisions for the betterment of the show or the program or the network or whatever it is, whatever project you're working on.
Before we get into your career path, I just want to see what do you remember? Do you remember certain people, certain events from good old Macomb and WIU and the broadcasting department back in the day?
Yeah. I mentioned those outtakes. I remember those outtake parties that we'd have at the end of the semester. Sharon Evans was a huge mentor for me. She really opened her arms up when I first got there, and she was the one that sort of invited me to come work the broadcasts and volunteer on the broadcasts when I was a freshman. And she mentored me throughout my years there at Western. So she was great. You Buzz were a great help as well, in guiding me through, classes and the different avenues to take. I did focus on TV more than radio, because I knew that's kind of where I wanted to lean. Specific events, I'm trying to think. Nothing really stands out too much, but I just remember spending all kinds of time in Sully Hall, up there in the floors, in the control room, in the studio. I mean, I lived there a lot of days, just getting my hands on, doing whatever I could do, taking in the broadcasts, watching, learning, and trying to do whatever I could to, once I got out of college, is to put my resume at the top of the list for some folks, when I was trying to get a job. So.
And then when you left, you went to St. Louis, is that right? And you did maybe an internship there. Is that how you got things started, Jeff? Yep.
That's exactly right. I had some friends that lived in St. Louis, and I kind of pinpointed St. Louis to do an internship, because, a lot of people do Chicago, but Chicago's so big. I wanted to kind of scale down just a little bit. So I ended up doing an internship at the ABC affiliate in St. Louis. At the time was Channel 30, I believe. And there I worked in the sports department, and the two folks there that I worked under were great. The main producer there had worked at ESPN, and he saw my work ethic, and right away he sent me out, knew I had experience doing a whole bunch of stuff from college, and sent me out to Cardinals games, Blues games, Rams practice to get interviews. So I got a lot more of that hands-on experience right away with that internship. And so I did all those events, and then he worked at ESPN previously. And so he I talk about all the time with folks that networking and who you know is a huge part of the business. And he basically got me the interview and an application at ESPN to become an entry-level production assistant. And with his help, obviously I had to go interview and sell myself, but with his foot in the door, I was able to parlay that into a full-time job at ESPN. And then I was kind of off and rolling from there.
Well, that really speaks a lot about, though, the work ethic that you took from here and then continued on, because I agree with you totally. The networking is so important and proving yourself to others. But really, when you left here with that kind of work ethic and then you moved on to ESPN, for a lot of people that are, young in the industry, they don't realize the time and sacrifices you have to make if you really want to get your foot in the door. And I'm sure when you got started at ESPN, you were working some long hours or odd hours.
Oh yeah, that's for sure. When you come in as an entry level PA, you're kind of at the bottom of the totem pole, so to speak. My hours when I started were, and if you think about it, it makes sense, because sports, for the most part, sports happen at night or on the weekends. So I worked pretty much every weekend. My schedule was, I had Mondays and Tuesdays off. So I was Wednesday to Sunday, and my hours were 6:30 to 3:30 in the morning. So we'd come in at 6 at night, and I'd get assigned some highlights to cut for Sports Center or for Baseball Tonight or whatever show was on that night. You'd have a couple games that you logged, and you would sit down and do your highlight once the game was over, get it ready for the show. And back then we had a 6 o'clock Sports Center, we had an 11, and we had a 2 a.m. So you would work that 2 a.m. Sports Center, making sure all your stuff was ready to go. And then once that was over, you could go home. So yeah, we were getting home middle of the night, you're sleeping a lot of the day and stuff like that. But, yeah, it's doing whatever it takes. And I remember back then that, they would call us for working overtime or a 6th day or a 7th day during the week, on a Monday or Tuesday or whatever. And I always jumped on that stuff. Number one, because I didn't have a whole lot else to do. I was living by myself, no family or friends really, but didn't have a whole lot else to do. But I also just wanted to get that experience, make a little bit more money if I could during the week, and then get in there and show everybody what I could do to kind of prove myself. But yeah, that's the one thing people think that TV is glamorous, and you get to be around the athletes and cover these sports that, you're already watching on TV. So you're doing something you already enjoy. But there's parts of it that are a job. There's times when you got to get up super early in the morning or stay overnight. You got to work completely through the night to get something done by the deadline. I've done that many times. But if you're willing to put that effort in and show that you can do whatever it takes to get the job done, you're gonna be successful.
So in 2005, I guess you moved to NASCAR. And how did that happen? And tell us a little bit about that job.
Yep. So I worked at ESPN for about 8 years or so. And when I was in Connecticut at ESPN headquarters, I had kind of carved out a little niche for myself, being a racing guy and knowing a lot about NASCAR. I started working on one of their NASCAR shows because they just didn't have a lot of people there that knew racing and knew NASCAR. So I kind of had a lot of knowledge. So I started working on, it was called RPM Tonight on ESPN2 at the time. And did that for a year or two when I was up in Connecticut. And then they transferred me down to Charlotte to work at ESPN Regional. They had a regional office in Charlotte that did even more racing. So I transferred down there and worked there for a couple of years. And then I got a call recruiting me to come over to NASCAR Productions to work NASCAR full-time and work for the actual sanctioning body, which was great. So that was basically one of my former staff members or employees that had moved over to NASCAR, and he knew that, I had a big knowledge in the sport and knew a lot. and basically hired me over as a senior producer to produce and lead some NASCAR. I started that in 2005. Was a senior producer, and boy, I've produced well over 1,000 NASCAR shows in the last 15 years. It's they all run together after a while, but they all take a lot of work. But it's fun. It's, you know, I've worked on the road. I've worked in a studio. You know, and they all kind of have their specific skill sets that you need. But it's all storytelling. You know, what we do in the TV business is just tell stories for the most part, whether it's watching the action on the track as it happens and telling that story as it unfolds, or if it's in a studio show where you're crafting, you know, a story about a driver or about a personality and telling their background a little bit. But yeah, I've been with NASCAR for 16 years now, and couldn't be happier. It's been a great journey.
And of course, the best thing that happens is you develop a family in North Carolina as well, right?
Yep, that's true. I met my wife when I had moved down here the early 2000s, and we got married in 2003. I now have 3 boys. One of them's a high schooler already, so
oh my gosh,
actually driving, which is crazy. So yeah, I have a high schooler, I have a middle schooler, and a elementary school 3rd grader, and they're all heavy into baseball. We have a lot of travel baseball that goes on around here, so big into baseball, all the sports. I actually have a basketball game, middle school basketball game to go to tonight here in a little bit, so we stay busy, and they're racing fans as well, and we go to the NASCAR races once in a while when I can get them out there and things like that. So yeah.
Do the boys have any interest in watching dad at work?
They do. They've come a few times, and they're kind of in awe when I take them into the production truck or into the control room, and they see all the, you know, the TVs, as they call them, the monitors and everything. They love also sitting on the set, you know, where the announcers, play-by-play or whoever, where they sit. So yeah, they do have an interest in actually. 2 of my sons were part of the media group at their schools. So sometimes they'll do the announcements on the video screens. You know, this is a few years ago before COVID, obviously, but they would do video messages every morning from the principal and tell the students and things like that. So they do take an interest in what dad does, and they do like coming out and seeing all that stuff.
So I'm sure that a lot of people always want to talk to you about NASCAR and what it's like to be around that kind of event on a regular basis when people are there. It's such a great community. It's really, I mean, those races are events, right? And so they want to know what it's like. What do you usually tell them when you know what NASCAR is about?
I normally tell people that it is truly an event. It's something like a rock concert, like, you know, even bigger than that. You know, there's throughout the weekend, there's a fan zone where there's stuff going on in the fan zone the entire time. There's on-track action all weekend long that you can catch. I encourage people to come out and see it if they've never been, because TV does it no justice. You can't relate to the speed, to the noise, to the just everything, the smells. It's a truly unique experience, and it's really it's exciting. So I always am encouraging people to come out and watch. The drivers are great. If you get a chance to meet them, they're all very cordial and will take the time to meet you, get an autograph, all those types of things. And the whole industry is great. I mean, you can't find a better family type industry where everybody's kind of working together for the same goal, and is very cordial, willing to help everybody out, and things like that. So yeah, I encourage everybody to come on out. And normally I can make them a NASCAR fan after a time or two at the racetrack.
On any type of production, as you were talking about, Jeff, you know, the storytelling importance of the role that you're involved with, how do you stop from getting wrapped up into, it's almost like doing any type of event. How do you not pull for one side or the other, or some racer that you really admire? How do you stop yourself from rooting for people so that you can do the storytelling?
That is tricky, but you just kind of have to separate yourself for a while. I didn't even have sort of a favorite driver or favorite team. I would almost root more for stories that I wanted to come true, because then we can tell that great story if it happens. So I would tend to root for those types of things. But you do have to step back a little bit and not, like they say in the business, there's no cheering in the press box, that kind of thing at sporting events. You do have to you got to limit yourself, and keep from tying yourself too much to one driver and that sort of thing, because there are great stories all over the sporting world. You can take just a normal, everyday, basic crewman on NASCAR that nobody even knows about, and I can guarantee you there's a good story that they have with their background or how they got in the sport or what they do in their everyday job. It's more of a matter of just digging and finding those great stories and getting those out there and telling them to the public.
What are some of those stories that you felt like you were personally either really proud to be associated with, or ones that maybe just a memory of something that you say, I'll never forget when that happened?
So back when I was with ESPN, I was the live event producer for several different racing series, drag racing, things like that. I've been involved, unfortunately, with 2 deaths on the racetrack. I was working the live broadcast for both of those. One was Greg Moore, who passed away. He was a IndyCar or open wheel kart series driver at California. And I was not producing that one, but my producer, the rule kind of is with any type of bad accident, when you see a huge wreck and you don't know if they're okay, you're living in that moment where the car comes to a rest and you have no idea if they're living or if they're not. And kind of the rule is, until you don't show a replay. You hopefully show it live so that people can see it live, but then once it's happened, you have to have confirmation that the person is and the driver is okay, and is at least alive. So I learned that right away from that first incident, when my lead producer used that rule, and we did not show the replay because we did not know, and he was loaded in an ambulance and a helicopter, and we still didn't know. So we never showed a replay to that. It was on live on the broadcast, but no replays. And then a couple years later, I was the live broadcast producer for an NHRA race in St. Louis, and we had a death on the track, and I used the same rule. The car came to a rest, didn't look like a bad accident really at all, but there was no movement from the driver. So we completely held off with replays again until we knew whether they were okay or not, and it turned out he was not. A piece of debris from the car had struck him, and unfortunately he passed away. So those are situations that you can never really prepare for. It was like I was talking a little earlier that, you have to rely on your instincts and your experience, and what you've learned to apply the best methods in those situations. And that's what I tried to do. And yeah, they were unfortunate for sure, but those are some things I'll never forget, throughout my career in television.
So in your current position, Jeff, as coordinating producer, how has the business changed in positive or negative ways? Like, for instance, is streaming, the future for so many of these sporting events?
Yeah, it is. And that's changed things dramatically. I would say when I first started in the business, I always looked back to my education, and I said to myself, I wish I would have taken more English classes because I ended up writing a lot. You don't realize it in this industry that a lot of what is said or what goes into shows is written down in scripts. And I've written a lot of scripts in my career. And when I first started out, I wasn't real great at writing scripts. So I wished I had taken a few more English classes and writing classes and journalism and things like that. But as I got more and more experience, that skill set came, and I think I'm a pretty good writer now, but it's taken 15, 20 years. So that's one thing that has changed greatly. I don't write as much as I do as I did back several years ago. And then you mentioned the streaming. That it all kind of shifted with file-based editing. We went away from, when I first started at ESPN, we had tapes, and we would take the tapes into the edit room, and that's how you edited your feature or your highlight or whatever it is. You'd have this cart. We had literally carts full of tapes that we would roll into the edit room with 40, 50 tapes, and you plug each of them in to grab your shot or shots. Now with file-based editing, it's made all of that much more efficient, which is great for the producers. The one thing though that is done is now a producer not only produces the piece or the show, but a lot of times they're a predator, which we call a producer/editor. So they're now, since they have access to all the files, they can put a rough cut together, where before in tape-based content, you would be the producer only, take your tapes in, know what shots you wanted, know what order you wanted them in. You take them into an editor and lay it out and have the editor lay out all the shots. Now we've switched much more to a predator model, where all the producers now pretty much need to edit, need to know how to do audio, a little bit of color correction. So a lot of that has evolved. And then streaming streaming and social media, I think, kind of go hand in hand. Social media kind of took a little bit of the storytelling away, I feel like, because it made everything become very quick, very, attention spans were very short, with social media as they are nowadays. We do a lot more quick videos. Not so much long form stuff anymore. I mean, we still do some of it, but that has evolved greatly. And yeah, streaming, it's kind of the same concept, where you do typically shorter form content for streaming than you would for traditional network television. Obviously network TV shows are a lot of times a half an hour or an hour. Streaming show could be 15 minutes, 18 minutes, 20 minutes. So it's trying to keep that attention, keep those ratings, keep the viewership, the subscriptions, whatever it is you're trying to get, and keeping all of those folks engaged on what your subject is, what your story is. So yeah, there's so many things, and I'm probably missing a whole bunch, but so many things have evolved throughout my 20 plus years.
So, and I hope that this podcast series is watched by our current students, because I think they can learn a lot from some of our alumni. So if you had a recommendation to a youngster that is interested in getting their foot in the door like you did 25 years ago, what kind of recommendations would you provide?
It's really, find what you love to do, whether it's, I found that sports was what I loved, and I first started with the goal of being on air, and that didn't quite work out. So I kind of veered off that path a little bit and went the producer route. But find what you love to do, whether that's shooting video with a camera, whether it's audio, whether it's, being on the radio, graphics, directing. There's so many different avenues to the broadcasting industry that you can take, and it's just finding whatever your niche is, and going for it all in, and being willing to do whatever it takes to do. You may have to volunteer, you may not get paid at first, you may have to provide some free work, so to speak, to show people your work ethic, what you can do. And it's just be willing to do whatever it takes. And then half the battle is separating yourself from the rest of the candidates. It's if you have a connection, if you can network, if you can use alumni, if you can use whatever it is to get your foot in the door or get your resume or your candidacy recognized and more towards the top of the list, that's going to do wonders. And I know it's tough a lot of times if you don't have a connection, but try to get, reach out to folks. Don't feel free. I should say, don't be afraid to cold call folks and just check in. I have people do that all the time with me. It's just asking about open positions or if we have freelance work available. So don't get discouraged. Keep working at what you ultimately want to do, and you'll be successful. Again, it comes down to in my mind, to hard work and work ethic. And if you do whatever it takes to get the job done, you're going to be successful.
Well, I often think of all the times that I've asked you, Jeff, to say a few words in a pamphlet or to talk to a potential student or give some advice. You've always come through, and I always have appreciated that your willingness to give back in those kind of ways, because that means so much. I mean, to our student base, to have somebody that's aspirational, and that's what you are out there, is somebody that they can look up to and think that this person would respond some ways. Very appreciated by everyone back here at WIU. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, I owe a lot to the broadcasting group there and everybody in Salee Hall. And, you were part of the reason why I'm where I'm at today. So.
Well, it's great to catch up with you, Jeff. I really thank you for your time. I know you're busy, and you've got 3 youngsters also that you've got, sounds like a very busy, active, non-professional life running around, which I remember those days as well. So thank you for your time. Thanks to Jeff for being this guest on the podcast. Make sure to join me next week when I'll catch up with another alum from the Department of Broadcasting and Journalism here at Western Illinois. Until then, stay safe, take care, and God bless.